They are, what you know about them, why they are running for this office, why they deserve your vote. That will be followed by a chance for Q&A, questions and answers, some of them scripted, some of them from the cards that you have on your table. If there are questions that you want to pose to the candidates, please direct them to our staff. Just hold up your hand and our staff will collect them and direct them to me. Then we will have a 3-minute summation of what you have heard, what you've learned, what you should know before you cast your ballot and send in that ballot in time to be counted on November 8th. So let us begin. In reverse sequence of the alphabetical order, I'd like to ask Brad Witt to, you have the longest commute this morning, to please introduce yourself and define your campaign and what it is that these folks should know about your candidacy.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. I'm State Representative Brad Witt, and I'm running for Congress because it's time that Oregon's working families have a representative in Washington. Someone who will stand up for them, someone who will understand what it's like to be from a working family, and someone who can truly represent middle-class Oregonians. I am that representative. I'm running for Congress because Oregonians need an advocate who has fresh and innovative ideas, someone who has worked in Washington, and someone who knows how to get the job done. I am that person. I'm running for Congress because Oregonians need a proven leader with a strong economic background and a leader who can find solutions to complex problems. My 30-plus years as a negotiator have taught me what it takes to bring opposing sides to the table and how to reach the best outcomes possible. I am that leader. As a state representative for Oregon's House District 31, I have sponsored and supported legislation to bring jobs to my district, provide additional support for the Oregon Food Bank, prevent violence against women and children, and stop animal cruelty. I support a woman's right to choose and believe that all Americans have the right to marry the person they love. The legislation that I've sponsored and passed as a state representative has also protected our rivers and fish, gotten criminals off of our streets, aided victims of natural disasters, promoted energy conservation, expanded business and job opportunities, and addressed the needs of women in today's society. This is a fine group of candidates before you here today, and I mean that in a bipartisan fashion. You know, the other Democrats and I have often heard these past few months that there isn't a lot separating us. Two of us even have the same name. Our stances on issues really aren't that different. We are Democrats after all and hold similar ideals, but the true difference between myself and my opponents is my experience. I'm the only candidate who is a former economist. My work has given me a unique perspective to clearly analyze and understand the crisis our state and nation face and the means to do something about it. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a professional negotiator, and that means finding not just a workable solution, but the best solution, and often between contentious parties. This has been great training for Congress. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, I'm the only candidate who understands the rural voter of CD1. We all know that there are hungry people across our state. We've seen the news stories, we've read the reports, but these folks aren't some abstract concept in someone else's backyard or in someone else's district. These are my neighbors, these are the folks of my district, and I will be proud to represent the entire Congressional District 1. I respectfully request your support and your vote. Thank you.
Do you mind if I stand? I'd like to stand just for the opening. My name is Rob Cornilles. As you look up here and see these four candidates, one of these doesn't go with the other. And it's not just party affiliation. It's also the fact that I, like most of you, am not an elected official. I, in fact, am not what they like to call a career politician. I'm someone who was born and raised in this district, born in Multnomah County, raised in Washington and Yamhill counties. And with my wife, Allison, as Jonathan mentioned, 16 years ago we started a business out of our home in Tualatin. I have experience having done that my fellow candidates here on the stage do not have. And as I look at what ails our country today, as I see the brokenness of Washington, D.C., as I see the partisanship that's tearing us apart and it's not providing solutions for our country when we need it most, I'm asking you to consider today to look at candidates a little bit differently. You'll hear a lot about policy today. In fact, most of you probably have questions about policy and how we view certain issues. And on some things we'll differ, on some things we'll be the same. And that's a very important part of what your congressman should be, as someone who understands policy and wants to be a part of creating good policy. But I'm asking you to expand your thinking today. As you listen to us, as you watch us, not only in this forum, but subsequent to today, throughout this campaign, and ask yourself, what do you want your congressman to be? And what do you expect your congressman to do for you? Now by this, the fact is, we're only here this morning for this particular forum because we had a representative who embarrassed us. And I'm the only one on this stage who 2.5 years ago decided to change that, to try to make this place a little bit better. And we're here because it's time to think differently. We're the only district out of 435 in the entire country that doesn't have a voice in Congress. I'm not amused by that. I'm ashamed of that. Because I look at all the talent that's here. I look at all the assets we have in this district. And I've asked myself, can't we do better? And certainly I believe we can. I've had the good fortune of hiring nearly 60 people in the last 16 years, and we've built something out of a spare bedroom in my house. We've built an industry leader. Some of you may know I started my career working in the professional sports world. Worked for an NBA basketball team, power forward. That's the only thing I'll say today that's not true. I actually worked for the Los Angeles Clippers basketball team. My job was to fill the building. My job was to bring people to South Central Los Angeles in one of the oldest arenas in the NBA and keep them there, not by compulsion, but because they were getting positive results from the experience. And it was more than shooting t-shirts into a crowd. And because of the success we had, it spawned a business. And now our company, GameFace, has consulted with more than 400 professional sports franchises and college athletic departments around the world, starting out of a little bedroom in Tualatin, Oregon. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can promote the LA Clippers, I can't wait to see what I can do with the 1st District of Oregon. Because we have so much talent, as I say here. So as you listen to us, as I asked you earlier, please ask yourself this very important question. Can I raise my expectations of what a congressman should be? Starting this morning, can I walk out of here thinking, you know, it's not just someone who focuses on policy, it's also someone who can get things done, who's a problem solver, who's a solution provider, someone who can advocate and champion for this district unlike we've seen in years. I grew up in Oregon, as I mentioned, and I was motivated by the Mark Hatfields of my party, by the Bob Packwoods of my party and his brain for taxation and tax policy and fiscal issues, by Vic Atiyeh, who because of his hard work was able to bring business to Oregon, not just from domestic competition, but internationally as well. These gentlemen inspired me, and now they are the model I would like to emulate. And I can do that with your assistance. I can do that with your help, with your vote. I certainly hope to win it today if I haven't already. My name is Rob Cornilles, and I thank you, and I thank the Westside Economic Alliance for allowing us to be here this morning.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone. I'm Suzanne Bonamici, and I'm running for Congress. You know, thank you. When I say those words, I think about what my grandparents would have thought if they could hear me say that. If they could hear about their granddaughter saying she's running for Congress, because they came here from this country, to this country from Italy, on a boat over the ocean many years ago, looking for the American dream. And they got here, and they worked hard. And my parents and my grandparents lived by these simple rules. You work hard, you play by the rules, and you're never afraid to do the right thing. And those are the values that I've had and I've shown throughout my career. I've lived those values through the choices I made. I worked my way through community college and law school, working at legal aid in Eugene, helping low-income families who were struggling to get by because they lost a job or lost a spouse or had medical bills that they couldn't pay. My first job out of law school, I went back to Washington, D.C., and I worked at the Federal Trade Commission doing consumer protection work. There was a mortgage company that was making misrepresentations, resulted in families losing their homes. I got the Federal Trade Commission to bring a case, and I held that company accountable for when people were losing their homes. I took them on. Back home in Oregon, I moved from Washington, D.C. to Washington County because my husband and I wanted to raise our kids in a good public school system like we have here in Washington County. My kids went through the Beaverton schools. So back here in Oregon, I worked in a law firm representing small businesses, franchisees, who bought franchises with their life savings and found that they had been misled. I helped them get their life savings back. And as a legislator, I am very proud to be known as someone who stands up for consumers, for small businesses, for middle-class families and those who are struggling. Defending and strengthening public education and making it easier for businesses to get access to the capital they need, to grow jobs and keep jobs right here in Oregon. And I'm proud that that work has been recognized. The Oregon League of Conservation Voters gave me their Protector of Children's Health Award for work that I did to reduce pesticide use in schools, bringing together a wide group of interests and passing bipartisan legislation. And the Oregon Nurses Association, in endorsing my candidacy, said that I've been, I have to get this right because it's a quote, an effective leader not just as a legislator, but as someone who has stood up for families her entire career. And earlier this year, I was proud that after the session, the Willamette Week, in their survey of legislators, gave me the highest score for integrity. That matters a lot to me, and it matters to people who are deciding who they want representing them in Congress. So I'm running to help restore these values to a Congress that seems to have forgotten them. Let's create jobs, put people back to work by helping small businesses and rebuilding our communities. Keep our promises to seniors on the Social Security and Medicare that they've earned. And strengthen public education, pre-K through college, because that's going to help grow our economy and strengthen our communities. And I'll bring this guiding principle to Congress. Opportunity for those who work hard and play by the rules. And accountability for those who don't, no matter how powerful they are. That's the America my grandparents crossed an ocean for. That's the America our children and our grandchildren deserve to have passed along to them. And that is why I'm running for Congress.
Well, I first want to thank the Alliance for hosting this great public discussion, and at the best time when people actually have their ballots and are ready to vote. So thanks for hosting it. Like all of you, I am not a guy that likes spinning his wheels. And when it comes to the issues that affect Northwest Oregon businesses, the people that live here, I work hard, I get the job done for us. What we need right now is a representative in Congress that can get the job done for us, supporting our local businesses and getting our people back to work. And that begins with my plan for a 21st century WPA program. We have got 30 million people in this country right now that aren't working enough hours to make ends meet. We've got contractors all over the state of Oregon that can't find a job for the life of them. And in the rural parts of the state, it's even worse than it is here in the metropolitan areas. Let's put our businesses and our people back to work, rebuilding the infrastructure of this state and this country, improving our roads and our bridges, retrofitting our buildings with green technologies. Let's build a new electrical grid that can accommodate the emerging renewable energy industries. Right now, it's about putting our businesses and our people back to work with jobs. You know, my family taught me an awful lot about what a job means. My grandfather, Avak Avakian, fled oppression in Armenia to build a better life for himself here. He was a carpenter. And his sons became carpenters or electricians. I remember my dad taking my brother and I through the streets of Fresno and saying, "You see that neighborhood over there? That was built by your grandfather and your uncles." I remember standing in the church that my parents were married in and that I was baptized in, knowing that that church was built by my family for the community. You see, a job is about more than just a paycheck. It's about who we are and how we choose to give back to the world. And that's why we need Congress to get off its hands and help our businesses put our people back to work. You know, I spent my life as a civil rights attorney right here in Northwest Oregon, supporting people who had suffered injustice. In fact, Debbie and I both grew up here, me right off of Murray Boulevard and Debbie in Rock Creek. We still live in a house about 3 miles from the childhood homes that we grew up in. And we did, Jonathan, meet at Aloha High School when we were 16 years old in Tom Hughes' civics class. It's true, and we raised Nathan and Claire here as well. In the State House and in the State Senate, I took action on the issues that matter to the people of Northwest Oregon by passing what has become the most effective Renewable Energy Act in the country, making Oregon a national leader in green jobs again, expanding the bottle bill for the first time in nearly 40 years, kicking payday lenders that were charging an obscene 500% interest out of the state of Oregon, and last year, in partnership with a lot of you, helping pass the bill that starting next year will bring shop classes back to the middle schools and the high schools of our state. When it comes to the issues that affect our businesses and our people, I roll up my sleeves, I work hard, and I have gotten the job done for you every time, and that is exactly what I will do for you in Congress. Thank you.
Pose questions to each of the candidates, beginning with a recent poll that found of the American public a negative approval rating of 51% for the U.S. Congress, exceeded only by a 55% negative approval rating for the U.S. Senate. The obvious question then is, why do you want to get into such a environment where you will be one of 435 representatives, and Oregon's first congressional district is the only open seat right now? Why do you want to get into such a position? But more importantly, whether you are a Republican or whether you are a Democrat, you will still be on the 3rd or 4th floor of the Cannon office building, about as far from the U.S. Capitol as a member of Congress can be. What influence can you hope to have as a freshman congressperson coming into the role of a very eager, very enthusiastic, and very fractious U.S. Congress? Mr. Avakian, would you like to lead off in alphabetical sequence this time? 1 minute, please.
Well, I don't believe the poll. What was it, 55% or something? How many of you think that Congress is on the right track? Okay. The real number is 100% don't think Congress is doing its job, and I got to tell you, I am one of them. I am fed up with Congress sitting on its hands while people are struggling. Your question is about how we're going to be effective. There's a reason that I was named the Consensus Builder of the Year in my last year in the state legislature. By passing bills like the Oregon Renewable Energy Act, the Bottle Bill expansion, the Agriculture and Community Water Act that gets water to rural Oregon and farmers and communities, and last year the bill to return shop classes, all with the Democrats and the Republicans, with the labor unions and the business groups standing side by side. Every time you can do it, you want to build the relationships you need to bring diverse groups together and move it forward. It's something I am particularly good at in what I've done in my public service in Oregon, and it's something that I will be able to do for you in Congress as well.
Thank you. I was surprised at the 51%. I thought it was lower. I too am frustrated with Congress. Congress needs to be doing its job, getting people back to their jobs. And I'll tell you, I mentioned I worked at the Federal Trade Commission. I'm a Democrat. I worked at the Federal Trade Commission in the Reagan administration, and I got things done. And when I came back here to Oregon, I've been serving in the legislature, reaching across the aisle, building relationships, getting legislation passed. And I think the most recent example I want to share with you is this past session when Senate President Peter Cornilles asked me to chair the Senate Redistricting Committee. Now, redistricting is something that's done every 10 years. It's an inherently political process that's usually very divisive and ends up being challenged in the courts and fought out with expensive legal battles. We defied the skeptics with my leadership in the Senate and the leadership of the co-chairs in the House. We traveled around the state. My co-chair, Senator Chris Telfer from Bend, and our two representatives in the House. We made a commitment, we got the work done and saved the state the uncertainty and the expense of fighting that out in court. That's the type of leadership that I'll show in Congress. Build relationships and get the work done.
Well, I haven't received any awards from any state bodies about my ability to work with people, but my awards come from the people that I serve all over this country through our business. As I mentioned, 400 organizations, whether you're the Boston Celtics, the New York Mets, the St. Louis Cardinals, the Chicago Bulls, they've come all the way to 12th in Oregon to get something done. And when I go and visit them in these diverse communities, and I sit at their conference table, or I visit with their staff, I do not ask them, say, before we begin, I just got to find out, are you a Republican or Democrat? Because I really don't care. All I care about is, do you want to get something positive accomplished? What are the results we need to achieve together? And then we proceed. And I don't think that we should be considering right now, in light of the unpopularity of Congress, doing more of the same. And I think you're being presented with that option here this morning. I don't think we should put people in Congress who have traditionally voted 98% of the time in Salem with their party. Chances are they're going to do the same thing in Washington, D.C. I don't know how to vote for my party. In fact, I've been vilified by many in my party in this primary because I'm not partisan enough. So be it. I'm not running for a party. I'm running for a people. Thank you.
The disapproval rating is a reflection of the public's disenchantment with political gridlock in Congress. And I, as a state representative, was someone who continually and consistently reached across the aisle to work with my colleagues in the other party. And I think that my 30-plus years as a professional negotiator have made it possible for me to be able to reach agreement where before there was none. And in the 2011 legislative session, because of my willingness to reach across the aisle, and because of my determination to work with all members of the legislature, I was able to reach agreements, more agreements than any other member of my caucus. And I think that that shows not only my bipartisanship, but also the training that will help me to begin to break down the partisan gridlock in Congress.
A congressional supercommittee of 12 members of Congress are tasked with the obligation of reducing our deficit by $1.2 trillion. A majority of the Democratic members of that committee yesterday approved a plan that would not only match that deficit reduction, but would actually double it to $2.5 to $3 trillion in deficit reduction in spending cuts and entitlement payments, but would also raise $1 billion $1 trillion in additional tax revenue. The question to you all will be, do you favor tax deficit reduction through tax revenue increases or through budget cutting of existing payments? We'll start with Suzanne Bonamici, please.
Thank you, Jonathan. I support a balanced approach. We can't cut our way out and we can't tax our way out of the situation that we're in. And in looking at any tax proposals, I'll determine if they're fair. Are they progressive or regressive? Do they impact low-income, middle-class families disproportionately? And that's what I'll be considering. We also have to look for smarter, better ways to do things. Look at what we're doing, for example, with agricultural subsidies. And Congressman Blumenauer just brought this to our attention recently. Why in the world are we subsidizing big agriculture at the expense of our local agriculture here in Oregon? Why in the world are we sending millions of dollars to Brazil to subsidize their cotton farmers? So let's start looking at smarter ways that we're spending the money that we have, set priorities, look at taxes to make sure that they're fair, and also look at smarter, better ways to do things.
You have to excuse me, but as a small business owner, when we talk about raising taxes, I wonder, wait a minute, what about all the taxes we've already sent to the federal government? What's going on with that? I think of the stimulus package, $1 trillion. What did it do? I think of Solyndra, $537 million. What did it do? I think of the waste and fraud that's happening in our Medicaid and Medicare programs. Even in the wars that we have been waging for the last 10 years, the waste and fraud that's happened there. So before I am eager to send more taxes to Washington, I'd like some accountability out there. I'd like someone to hold them accountable for that which we've already sent them. The answer is to create more jobs, thereby creating more taxpayers. I don't think our problem is we don't have enough high taxes. The problem is we don't have enough people who are paying taxes because they're unemployed, or they don't have enough work so as to pay into the system. The number one priority is job creation. That will increase revenues and decrease the dependence on federal government programs that are helping to raise our deficit.
The traditional responses to an economic downturn simply don't work. To tax people who are out of work only puts a greater bite on the family budget, and to cut programs for the very same people eliminates their safety net. We need to begin to build jobs in this country, more better paying jobs, and I would focus on critical infrastructure in our nation's economic sectors, energy generation and transmission, communications, as well as transportation. And I certainly would begin investing money in our public buildings, local, state, county, and federal. I would use the Bush tax cuts that I would put an end to and invest that money today so that by the end of the decade, with the investments in these infrastructures, our nation would have the most modern and efficient infrastructure of any nation in the world. In the process, we would generate jobs, rebuild America from the ground up, and get our economy back on track towards prosperity once again.
Thank you, Jonathan. One of the candidates up here in the last question and in previous forums likes to vilify those in public service as not having the right kind of experience to govern, and instead favors people in the private sector. From somebody who has both 15 years experience in the private sector, has run his own business, met a payroll every time, and who has the experience of having managed a $50 billion+ budget for the state of Oregon, let me tell you how I would approach this. I think the super committee has got it wrong, boxing themselves into this discussion of tax increases versus cuts. I think what we need to do is take care of the money we have better. We've spent over $1 trillion on 3 overseas conflicts, continuing to spend billions and billions and billions while businesses and people are struggling in this country. We continue to let crazy tax expenditures and loopholes suck money away from us. What we need to do is redirect that money back to public education and job training programs in order to strengthen our communities.
Let's talk about that a little further. I provided each of the candidates, and on the back table there are the latest economic indicators for our region and the unemployment rate of the 4 counties that we represent and serve. The takeaway from that is that Oregon's unemployment rate has led the nation now for 184 consecutive months, and since John Kitzhaber's first term as governor in 1996. The question is, are we the victims of bad timing or bad luck? Or is there something else that we can do as members of Congress to change that fortune and bring back prosperity to the state of Oregon? Where do you see our opportunities, and how do we return Oregon's prosperity? Mr. Cornilles.
You have to look at your assets, that which you do well. As a native Oregonian, I look at the 1st District, and I see all these wonderful resources we have, both natural and human. And I ask myself, why aren't they being propped up? Why aren't they being advanced in Congress? Because we've had poor leadership. We've had ineffective leadership. And I'm speaking of congressional. We could talk about state some other time. Ladies and gentlemen, we are a trade-dependent district. We have Intel with nearly approaching 16,000 employees. Nike with 6,000. Columbia Sportswear with 5,000. And all the other companies that support their businesses, as well as the other emerging businesses in this district. And yet, we have candidates up here, 2 of them who said they're adamantly opposed to the free trade agreements that would open up new markets for these local businesses, and another candidate who said that she still hasn't decided yet. She wants to discuss it more. This was passed 2 weeks ago in Congress. It's time for leadership, not finger-in-the-wind politics.
Oregon has led the nation in unemployment because many of our traditional industries have been on the decline now for several decades. Forestry, fishing, and farming. It's time that we moved our focus on jobs and business creation and in those areas where we can not only inject money the fastest into our economy, but also help stabilize the economic freefall that we've been in. It's time that we began investing in our nation's critical infrastructures. I mentioned energy before. There is so much opportunity for us to begin the development of green renewable energy and to build new transmission lines to carry that energy so that we have the smartest grid of any nation in the world. Our economy travels on our transportation network, and we need to invest in that as well.
You know, as your Commissioner of Labor and Industries, businesses uniformly tell me there's 2 reasons why they don't want to come here or can't expand. One is they don't trust local and state government on what new regulations are going to be imposed on them. And 2, they don't know where they're going to get their trained workforce. One of the things we have got to do is respect the traditional Oregon industries of timber, fishing, and agriculture. It's why I've helped set up a training program at Hampton Lumber Affiliates in Tillamook that partners with their local high school and community college to teach young people how to work in the 21st century mill. But we haven't lost all of our jobs simply because of the trade agreements that some speak of. Let's talk about trade for a minute. Why are our mills shutting down? Because we're cutting trees and we're sending the logs to Japan and China, and then paying a premium for the milled lumber to come back into the country. That is a loss of jobs that makes no sense, and a trade policy that is shooting us in the foot.
It is about jobs, and I'll continue to work on getting access to capital for small business and getting people back to work on infrastructure projects. And it is a trade-dependent district, and I have been consistent, regardless of who I'm talking to about this issue. I want to make sure that we're exporting goods, not exporting jobs. And I've said the same thing every time I've talked about this, and you can tell just from the votes in our own congressional delegation how complex the issue is with the particular trade agreements that were just passed. And so I want to make this offer to you. Some people say that the trade agreements will be good for the 1st Congressional District, and some say that they won't. So if you're here today or if you're listening today, I want to hear from you. I have staff in the back. Give them your card, your contact information. Tell me, will they help your business? Will they hurt your business? Because I've heard both, and I want to be an informed representative and make a decision that's the very best for the 1st Congressional District. So please, give me your information. I want to hear from you, because there are reports that say that they'll be good. There are reports that say that they'll export jobs, not goods. I understand the importance to the District of Trade, and I understand the importance of jobs. I want to export goods, not jobs.
Well, it's obvious from these answers that there's a lot of energy among these candidates, so let's talk about energy. Concerns of global warming suggest that our winters are going to be rainier, but our summers are going to be drier, suggesting that we could do better to store more water. And yet yesterday, on the White Salmon River in Washington State, we blew out the Condon Dam that had stood there for more than 100 years. We've also removed the Marmot Dam on the Little Sandy River, others on the Rogue River and the Klamath River. If we're taking away our renewable energy sources, and if we are to store more water during the lean summer months, where are we going to make up the green energy or sustainable energy that each of you say we need more of? Mr. Witt, would you lead our answers, please?
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And yes, there are a number of opportunities to develop additional green energy throughout our state. Wave energy on Oregon's coast. Our state is uniquely situated to develop that. We need to develop transmission lines as well. In addition to much of the wind energy that we have already begun to develop in eastern Oregon, we have opportunities to establish very large solar farms in central and eastern Oregon, again needing additional transmission capacity. And there are a number of very promising geothermal locations throughout the Cascades, central and eastern Oregon as well. As we develop each of these, we are also going to have to develop our transmission capacity, and in the process, we will be creating very good jobs.
You know, there's a reason that I worked so hard in writing and passing Oregon's Renewable Energy Act. Let's look at it just from an economic perspective. Oregon is situated better than nearly any geographical area in the world to take advantage of this market. Our shelf off the coast is the best suited quite literally anywhere on the globe for wave technology. Our area in the central part of the state, down into southern Oregon, next to Iceland, one of the best in the world for geothermal development. In fact, Klamath Falls is entirely run, their electricity, from geothermal energy. And we are becoming a world leader in solar development and wind development. Oregon is the place to do it if we take advantage. We should be setting up manufacturing facilities for the component parts. We're already becoming a national leader in green jobs. And so this is a huge economic boon for the state if we simply take advantage of the position that we're in. But the key is not setting up headquarters here for these companies. It's getting their manufacturing facilities out of Asia and Germany and to start manufacturing the parts.
As a strong supporter of the renewable energy bill from the Oregon legislature, I also will be a champion for the industry here in Oregon. Wind, solar, wave, there are a lot of interesting developments happening with wave technology over on our coast. We can be a leader in renewable energy here in Oregon, and I will be a champion for those businesses, for manufacturing, and for development, and what we need to grow the renewable energy industry here in Oregon.
These are areas where we agree, those of us up here on the stage. We all agree that Oregon is blessed with fantastic natural resources. And I concur, whether it be geothermal, which has been successfully utilized in Southern Oregon for decades at OIT, or whether it be wave energy on the coast, whether it be wind or solar, etc. We need to take advantage of what we've been blessed with. But let's not forget, the other thing we must take advantage of is the brain power and the intellect and the innovation of the Oregonians. And I've always been a believer that rather than having government top down and distill ideas and mandates to the private market, let's let the private market work. And let's take the shackles off them. It doesn't mean we don't like regulation, it just means we need reasonable regulation. And one great example is our forests. When I grew up in Oregon, our forests fed this state. And now it's a depressed area all over the state because of over-regulation. We need moderation, ladies and gentlemen. I'm done, Jonathan.
Last year at this time, there was discussion of a liquefied natural gas terminal being built in Platskanie area on the lower Columbia River. Would you have supported or opposed the LNG facility or the pipeline to transport that gas through Oregon? Mr. Abaki, please.
You know, it just wasn't the right project at the right time. I got to tell you, we spin our wheels so much in Oregon over projects that just aren't going to happen, and that project was not going to happen. And it took a lot of political capital fighting over it. The last discussion we had about renewables is a great example of where we should be heading, because there isn't the same kind of divisiveness over doing the project, and there are a lot more jobs to be had. So what I would rather have seen happen is, instead of us spending years fighting over one facility with limited job potential, that we had put our efforts into all of the other wave, wind, solar, and geothermal type of facilities that would have given us a great energy source, thousands of jobs, and a manufacturing component as well.
I represent a Senate district that includes a lot of people who were extremely concerned about that project. And they weren't just environmentalists, they were private property owners who said, these pipes are going to be going through some prime Washington County farmland and agricultural land. This was a very controversial project. It was going to be tied up with legal battles, and I heard from my constituents loud and clearly that they had concerns. Let's focus on projects that can actually get done without that controversy, and build renewable energy jobs that will actually bring about jobs and bring about renewable energy in a way that's not so controversial.
I was in favor of LNG last year, and I remain in favor of it. However, I don't think the federal government should be determining siting of LNG lines. I think that's a local issue. And the reason why I was in favor of it is because I believe that compromise could be met between industry and private landowners. And if we always avoid difficult, prickly, controversial issues and siting when we're talking about building renewables in our state, we're never going to get anything done. We need leaders who can bring all sides of an issue together at the table and find some way that we can move forward. We have to build safe, reliable energy sources that are also affordable. And we can do that if we have leadership, as I say, who can encourage that type of open discussion. But just to put up roadblocks will continue to make Oregon lagging in these areas where we should not be.
I oppose 6 of 7 LNG projects, including the Palomar pipeline, because I determined that these projects would have done damage to our forests, our farms, and our ecosystems in this state. I favored one, Port Westward, and I favored that because it would have added value, economically, socially, and environmentally. Environmentally, it would have designated $59 million to salmon habitat restoration and enhancement, the largest such project that would have ever been conducted on the Columbia River. Economically, it would have created 450 construction jobs over 3 years, and about 6 permanent full-time operational jobs. And socially, it would have brought $8 million to rural communities in my legislative district that never in our lifetimes or our children's lifetimes would the citizens or those communities ever hope to find that kind of revenue. this was an opportunity lost.
As important as energy is to our community, so is water. This summer, the Dollar Lake fire in the Mount Hood National Forest taught us that it's difficult and dangerous to have the water supply for the largest municipal region in our state in a tinder-dry national forest on the slopes of an active volcano. Here in Washington County, one of the biggest projects that we have in front of us is the expansion or the replacement of the Scoggins Dam and Henry Hagg Lake in western Washington County, owned by the Bureau of Reclamation and operated by Tuolumne Valley Water Project partners. Do you favor the replacement of the Scoggins Dam and the raising of the Hagg Lake in order to supply the water supply needs of our county and the Tuolumne Basin for the next 50 years? Ms. Bonamici, would you please lead on?
I look forward to working with our delegation on this project to try to balance the water needs of our municipalities and our agriculture. It is something that needs to get done, and I know that the delegation is working hard with the stakeholders, but the pace is too slow. We need leadership in there who can go in, work together to bring the agricultural community, the municipal water community, and all the stakeholders together, pick up the pace, and let's do this in a responsible way so that we can meet the water needs of everyone in the 1st Congressional District and the surrounding areas.
I agree with Suzanne. She took my answer, doggone it. The fact is that this project, like others that we've seen, such as the Columbia River crossing, are being held up by an overabundance of special interests who continue to pour more money and don't get anything measurably done. And we need to create greater transparency in the process. We need leadership that will hold these parties accountable and move forward. Because in the meantime, as Jonathan stated earlier in our forum, Oregon continues to be above the national average in unemployment now for 15 straight years. We need economic activity drivers, whether it be water, whether it be transportation systems, whether it be renewable energy that's clean, affordable, and reliable. And we need leaders who have the clout in Congress who can also work with people here in Oregon to get it done, move forward. You're depending on these leaders. I'll be that kind of leader that you can rely on.
Having adequate clean water will be one of the major considerations, whether our state is able to move forward in business and jobs creation in the future. It is fundamentally important that we do everything that we can in Congress to make sure that local communities are able to enjoy the kind of economic development that they want in their local communities. As your congressman, I will do everything that I can to make sure that the BLM works in full cooperation with local government and local water bureaus to make sure that that kind of water is delivered to those communities that have economic development plans that are dependent upon that adequate supply of water.
Let me tell you what I love about this project is it recognizes that for our businesses and for our people that we need to have a generational view of a clean and reliable water supply. 50 years, and that should be the beginning point. I was very pleased when I served in the state legislature to be able to take the lead in helping get the title transfer done for this project. And the problem now is that you have a federal government that is unreasonably requiring these seismic studies in order to let us move forward with it. If the federal government has their way, the safest place in Oregon to live is going to be directly underneath that dam. Sometimes we do a lot of talk about consensus building, and you want to be able to do that when you're in Congress, but sometimes you need a representative that will take a federal agency and give it a shove. And what we need to get this project done right now is a congressman that can throw the knockout punch to that federal agency and say, let us get on with our work here in Oregon.
An interesting segue to the next question from a member of the audience. And that is, since local governments do most, if not all, of the public works projects and service delivery, what new ideas do you have to work with local governments more effectively? And Brad, you get to follow up your own answer.
Well, actually, my answer is a good segue into that, because it's all about relationship building. And in my time at the state legislature and as a state elected official, have built terrific relationships with our local governments, which is why you see so many city councilors, mayors, and county commissioners that have endorsed me in this race. Let me answer it this way. When I think about going back to DC, I don't think about going back there and becoming a part of that culture. I grew up here, my relationships are here. Oregon is my home, and it will continue to be my home. And I'll get the work done in DC for us, but my focus is going to be on what the local governments need. In a policy sense, the biggest job is going to be to make sure that the county payments continue coming in from Washington, D.C. I cannot even believe that Congress sits on its hands without getting the county payments back into local communities. That's going to be the first. The second is with regard to public education. They've got our federal tax dollars there, and they hold the No Child Left Behind a race for the top over our heads and say, you want the money, this is what you got to do to get it. Forget that. Give us back our federal tax dollars for our public schools.
As someone who's served 3 terms in the Oregon legislature, I understand the importance of collaboration and partnerships. I'm not going to change when I go to Washington, D.C. I've been there and worked there. I know what it's like. I'm going to be a representative here for the 1st Congressional District who remembers where she's from, who knows the importance of building those relationships with cities, with counties, with local governments, to make sure that we're collaborating and meeting all the needs. But those aren't the only relationships I'll maintain. I'll maintain relationships with businesses and labor and everyone in the district, constituents as well. I will represent this district as this district and not as somebody in Washington, D.C. This is my home. This is the district I'll represent.
It's really, it needs to be said that the people in this room are what built consensus in Salem. Because you put a split House and an almost split Senate in Salem this last year. You deserve the credit for the consensus building and bipartisanship that took place in Salem, because you forced our elected officials to not be partisan. As it relates to local, I've already received the endorsements of 18 mayors in this district, Republican and Democrat. And I haven't even won my party's nomination yet.